So I want to welcome everybody to the Los Angeles Historical Society's webinar. We're excited to have you all. My name is Danny Jensen, and I am the program's chair. And we are excited to have our presentation tonight. Author and historian Colleen Adair Fliedner is going to be speaking about a sort of highlight from her book, True Tales of Fascinating True Tales of Old California, and highlighting Griffith Park, as you might see behind her there. So we're really excited about that. And before we dive into that, just wanted to go over a little bit about the Historical Society. I know see many familiar names there. But for those of you who are new, welcome, and welcome to all of you. Um, we do a number of webinars throughout the year like this, where we work with historians and authors focusing on LA history. And that is sort of one part of what we do. We also do a lot of in-person events. We recently, just this past Sunday, we had one of our lecture series at the Central Library, the Marie Northrop Lecture Series. And that was a huge success, great turnout, looking at a book of photographs on Los Angeles before the freeways. So we did that. We also had a table set up at the LA Pride Festival, and that was we had a great turnout for that. So we do a lot of events like that in person. We also have a number of members-only benefits. So that includes the tours of the LA City Archives. Mike Holland, who's our vice president, he's also the city archivist, and he gives these wonderful tours of the LA Archives. And you haven't been before, I highly recommend it. And even if you have, I recommend joining again. We don't currently have a set date for the next one, but I'm sure there'll be one coming up soon. But again, that's the members only tour, and that gives you a chance to see fascinating documents from the history of LA, maps, other artifacts as well. In fact, one of the highlights I like to mention is the deed to Griffith Park is there as well. So apropos for tonight. So that's one of our other events, and we're also developing some other partnerships. We're going to be doing some other member perks that are going to be in the works, and you'll learn more about those soon. And I will, sign up for our mailing list. You probably already are. That's how you got here. But also, again, consider joining as a member if you haven't, or if you've lapsed, that's okay. We welcome you back. Your support really helps us do what we do and continue with both these webinars, the in-person events, our scholarship program for history students. And thank you. Yeah, Charlie, our board president, just dropped the website in the chat. There you go, Charlie, if you wanted to say a few words.
Sure, Danny. I'd just like to thank you for doing the webinar. Your webinars are always interesting. And in addition to that, I'd like to welcome everybody who's logged on this evening. I know a large number of people had made reservations. I hope you're all on. And there's a variety of things that we do as a historical society. And Danny's already mentioned a few, so I won't be redundant. But basically, we're here to educate the public and to share and promote both academically and in small groups the history of the city of Los Angeles. So if you're someone that's grown up here or have moved here later on, and you want to know more about Los Angeles and how it came to be, this is a place for you. So you're all welcome, and hope you enjoy the webinar this evening.
Thank you, Charlie. I just had a question. Someone was asking about the scholarships. I will drop in the chat.
Or they could go to the website.
Yeah, actually, that's true. Yeah, if there's the website there that Charlie put in the chat, lacityhistory.org. We'll have more information on the scholarships there, and you can contact us for that.
But briefly, if we're working with the Cal State University campuses locally, Northridge, Los Angeles, and Long Beach. So if you're a student at one of those schools, see your department chair and ask him or her.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Charlie. All right. Excellent. So once again, I want to welcome Colleen and really excited to learn some of the fascinating lore and history of Griffith Park. Again, I'll plug Colleen's book if it doesn't disappear into the map for me. I always have trouble with this.
There it is.
There we go.
There we go.
Fascinating True Tales of Old California. So Colleen is going to highlight some of the stories from the book, but there are also plenty of others, and it's a really fun and interesting read, and really just a great way to she's done some fantastic research into some of these lesser known stories, or sometimes you might recognize the name but didn't know the full story behind it. So definitely encourage you to pick up a copy, local bookstore, and on Colleen's website, I can drop the link there when we're done. And otherwise, I'd like to hand it over to you, Colleen. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's see. So where to begin? Oh my goodness. Griffith Park. Everybody knows Griffith Park. It's a wonderful place to go, and we've all been there with our families many, many times. And if you haven't been there, then make a point of going there. But we're not going to talk about all of the fun stuff, the merry-go-round and all of that tonight. I'm going to talk about some things that you may or may not know about Griffith Park from its past. And some of those rumors and legends still persist. So we thought it would be a fun kind of read to bring you up to date on who Griffith was and some of the things you might not know about the park. So I'm going back to the beginning, which was in California history when the Spanish came in and were exploring California to set up missions and settlements where they could bring their citizens up from Mexico and populate California so that other countries wouldn't come in and claim the land. So that's what that was all about. And they also needed to, of course, make the native people Catholic, trying to do that by setting up the missions and so forth. So in 1771, the San Gabriel mission was completed, and they brought Spanish soldiers in as guards. There were skirmishes, there were thieves sometimes coming in to steal things and so forth. So the Spanish soldiers lived there with their families. And one of the main man we're going to talk about tonight is Jose Vicente Veliz. You've heard of Veliz Park, Boulevard, all of these things. And that's a very famous name, and a lot of people don't realize where it came from, its origin. It was from him. So he enters our story as a guard at the mission. And then in 1771, when they opened the mission, about 10 years had passed, and then they decided they were going to bring up people from Mexico to create a pueblo where there was a nice river that's now the Los Angeles River, and they had been scouted out beforehand. So 44 people came up, long, arduous trek from Mexico to the mission, and then that's a soldier, and and that's not Feliz, but we were trying to find something to represent him, and he was, that's as close as we could come. So he is chosen to lead these people into what would become Los Angeles. And it was only about a 9-mile trip. And they brought, as you can see from that picture, they brought a lot of livestock with them and so forth. Jose's wife had died in childbirth. So he managed to bring his family, which was something between 5 children and 8 children, depending on which source you read. But he had a nice big family he brought with him. So he becomes the kind of the mayor of the new Pueblo. they had to set up these stick houses and so forth, and then go about building their adobes and so on. He was kind of the judge, law, mayor, you name it, all in wrapped into one, and was very well known. And some journals talk about him as being very harsh, mean kind of, but he did a good job. So between 1784 and 1821, as many of you know, they Spanish government began to dole out property, large property like Nieto and Dominguez and so forth. And that's when it supposedly Jose was to receive a grant for property that would become the Rancho Los Feliz. But then there's a debate about whether or not it was actually deeded to him or if he was just given permission to graze cows on the property. And it's over, of course, where Griffith Park is now and in that area, general area. But we do know that the grant or permission was about 6,637 acres. And if any of you have studied any of the other ranchos like Nieto, this is much, much smaller. But still, in my opinion, I worked on some of the things back in '84 when I was in school. We did a huge thing at Cal State Long Beach and Northridge and Dominguez Hills about the ranchos. And they weren't nearly as, I want to say pretty, but as they didn't have the good soil that the Los Feliz had. They didn't have the beautiful trees and the wildflowers and the grasses growing all over. It was a beautiful property. So I think he kind of won on that score because I think he got the best piece of land, but that's just my opinion. So he had his children, they put in crops, they built Pueblo. He's given this property sort of, and he just stays there. There's nothing, he doesn't squat it or anything. It just is just there. It's believed by many that he got married again, and why not? There were plenty of single women in town. But there's a disagreement about, did he marry Maria Ignacia Feliz, or was that his daughter-in-law? So I believe it was his wife because in 1822, when Jose Feliz died, all of the land was given to her. She took it over. So she was a very smart woman and a very good businesswoman. And at that time, you needed a certain number of cows to be able to register your brand, your cow that you put on your cattle. And so she made sure she had, I think it was 150 cows, and she made sure that they had enough, and then she registered her brand. And then she went a step beyond that. And in 1839, she secured the water rights for the rancho. And it's a good thing she did because, as you'll see later in the story, water rights, that was a very huge issue for Los Angeles. I mean, it still is. That's why they have so many problems and have had in the past with droughts and things. So she secured that so that her children and their children would not have to worry about having the gringos. And there were a lot of them coming in from America and other countries, and they were claiming land and buying up the land. And surely that area would have been gobbled up because that Los Angeles River is what everybody depended on for the water in the Pueblo. Now, again, there is a controversy again about whether or not she was a Verdugo. And you see the name here, the Verdugo, in this plaque. They left Feliz out. In any case, and it should have said that it was Jose Feliz and not her that founded the rancho. But in any case, she married a Verdugo after he passed away, and we have the name of the person that had married her. So that, you know, that should clear that mystery up. And there are so many complications in doing this research. There's so many people that have the same names, that Jose, lots and lots of Marias, and then they would repeat generations having the exact same names. So I can see why people got confused. So the Feliz family flourished, and most of the heirs of Jose lived on the property and made it a very productive rancho. Lots of cattle, everything was going well. And when Maria died, then she divided up the property among all of the children, and I imagine it was a pretty big group by then. And Rick even happened across an old map that had these little slivers of lots in the name of each of the children, and we think it was maybe down around where that big fountain is now, before you enter the park. Since we're kind of talking about dark incidents that happened on the property, and this is before the famous curse, one of Maria's sons, Domingo Feliz, and it was Jose's son, in 1836, he was murdered by his wife's lover. And that was a big, big thing back then. She was arrested because you couldn't just leave your husband, and she left her husband and hid out with her lover. The lover kills Domingo when Domingo tries to take her back, and then both of the lovers are arrested and taken back into Los Angeles, into the Pueblo, put up against a wall, adobe wall, and then killed by a firing squad. So that was one of the first interesting kind of weird things I came across. All right, now that famous curse story that everybody knows. It centers around one of Maria's children, Antonio Feliz, a man who never married. He lived at the old adobe with his sister Soledad and her 17-year-old daughter, Petronilla. Between 1860 and 1862 and 3, there was a terrible smallpox epidemic that swept through Los Angeles, and a lot of people died. I saw a lot of big numbers, 150, 500, but there weren't that many people. So we just know that it was pretty bad. And Antonio Cornell showed up at the rancho with his lawyer when he found out that, and a lot of Antonios here, so don't get confused, but Antonio Feliz was on his deathbed. So what happened was then the lawyer and best buddy Cornell show up at the door and want to see him on his deathbed. So Horace Bell, when I was researching my book, I came across this story. I was reading Horace Bell's book again on the old West Coast. And what he did was, he says, he went into the Pueblo and he interviewed the old people, kind of doing oral histories. And this was one of the stories that he was told, and the people of Los Angeles truly believed the story. I mean, they truly believed it. So he wrote about these events in his 1901 manuscript, talking about early Los Angeles. So what the people told him was that Feliz's sister was at home caring for him when the two men insisted that they be let in to visit Feliz. They entered the house, paper and pen in hand, and they wrote a will for the dying man on the spot. Then they took it into his sick room. According to his later testimony, the lawyer said that Feliz was so sick he couldn't even nod his head and he couldn't speak. So they asked him to simply sit up and move, and he couldn't do that either. So what Horace Bell says that they did, since he couldn't nod or anything, was they slid a board under his head and made his head nod when they read him the will. And the will said that Cornell would be the executor of all of the property, and in the will, everything would go to him as well as him being the executor. And it bypassed all of the family members. So, of course, people were not, the family members and the people that were friends, true friends and so forth, were very upset about his ability, because he did take it into a court. And you want to slide the thing over? Oh, no, that's first. Okay. Anyway, let me tell this first. So Belle's version of the story continues with the return of Petronilla to the house. She had been staying in town with a friend, and she was shocked that both she and her mother and her cousins and all the other Felizes had been left out of the will. She was furious, and this is out of the book. With her eyes blazing hatred and fire, she placed a curse upon the two men, their families, and the rancho land itself. She said, "There will be a myriad of demons floating in the air like so many vultures. They ride the storm clouds. The air darkens, the thunder rolls, the lightning flashes, the rain falls in torrents." The curse goes on and on and on. And Rick put up another part of it here. If you take a glance at it, it fills many, many, many paragraphs. And it's really doubtful a 17-year-old girl would have come up with all of this stuff. But anyway, the end of this tirade was that she falls over and dies. And then I read something that said she really didn't die. She lived to 90. So who knows? I looked through the records, the city records and so forth, and there was no mention of any of this. So there you go. In any case, the will that Coronel made was approved by the judge. This was the newspaper clipping I found of, well, they say if any person or persons wants to contest this will, show up here. But he took everything from these people and they had no money to hire an attorney or anything. So it just all went to him. And then the people of Los Angeles believed the curse to be real, especially as the years passed, and many of the men who purchased the rancho property met with tragedies. That also included the judge who accepted this will as true, and a lawyer also died young. The one odd exception was from the main character, Antonio Coronel, who lived to a ripe old age. I think he lived to 80 or 80 plus. In fact, he had a very successful career. He was extremely wealthy from the rancho land. And he was able to sell the lands that he had just stolen or whatever. It was about $1 million in that year. And in today's money, it would be about $35 million to kind of give you an idea of how wealthy he was. He went on to be elected mayor of Los Angeles, and he owned many, many businesses, and later he became California state treasurer. But then the way the curse was supposedly worded was that Coronel would live a long, long life, but those who inherited his great wealth would lose the money and have terrible lives. And on that score, the curse was actually correct. More than likely, the story from a more reliable source than Horace Bell, our colorful writer, was that that Coronel had purchased some of the land from Maria's children. They had those little lots and so forth, and some of them maybe decided they wanted to move away or whatever. So supposedly he came along and purchased some of the land, and he was just trying to get the rest of the rancho to go with it. Now, did he pay for it? Couldn't find anything that said that he paid for it. One place it said that he paid $1 an acre, and that was nothing back then. By then, the land was worth a lot more, thousands of dollars more. So it's true that most of the people that purchased the land in Los Feliz met with bad endings or had very bad luck. So I think that has kind of fanned the flame on this curse business. And coincidentally, when I did my book, some of the people that were involved, I had actually written stories about in my book. For example, James Lick. Now, James Lick is on that plaque that you just saw as one of the principal owners of the rancho, and that's not true at all. He was a millionaire from Northern California, and he purchased what was the southwest portion, which is still known as a lick tract. And he purchased it from Coronel. He never owned the entire rancho land, and his name really doesn't, like I said, belong on that plaque, at least my opinion is. Coincidentally, he lived a very unhappy life, and he was a very strange man. He built a mansion in San Jose where he lived alone, and he slept on a door propped up with sawhorses. He left his fortune for building the Lick Observatory just east of San Jose, and he's interred still to this day. Oh, go back to that one. That's his land is over in Hollywood. It's on the bottom portion, Rick says. He's over here. And in any case, it showed the grave. Yeah. This is where James Lick is buried. That was his stipulation. He was going to give all of this money to build this beautiful observatory, but he has to be buried on the property under this big old telescope, and he has to have fresh flowers every day. And they still do that. So in 1868, Cornell sold another portion of the rancho that included a lot more with water rights and so forth. He was a very prominent Angelino, and I was looking for him, and he did like a lot of public speaking during the Civil War era and so forth. He was very bigoted against people from other races, let's just say that, and so forth. But he was supposedly a young, handsome man that had never married, and he had fights with other guys over girls. So he had enough money though to buy that beautiful rancho. And he had come in from America to do that specifically, and his family were lawyers and so forth, very successful. But was it the curse that ended Howard's young life? As Petronia said, Charles Howard died in a shootout with Daniel Nichols, son of a former mayor. Nichols moved to Mexico to escape the fallout of killing Howard, but he was later killed by banditos. So it seemed like, even just being close to people who own a rancho could do you in. A well-to-do American named Leon Baldwin, and he's no relation to Lucky Baldwin, as some of the articles say. That's a no, he's not. He bought Charles Howard's land. According to the newspaper, Baldwin put a lot of money into the rancho. He brought in imported cattle because reportedly some of the California cattle were pretty thin. They didn't have a lot of fat on the bodies. And so he brought in some really expensive cattle to breed. He built a dairy and he remodeled the old house to accommodate his family. His brother John built a mansion on a nearby hill, and then all hell broke loose. The cattle died because the grasshoppers swarmed all over the fields with the wild grasses and ate everything. They ate the crops. The grapes in the vineyard, and everybody had a vineyard back then. The vineyard dies, all the grapes die from blight, and then a fire in the grain bin that was being ripened, it caught on fire. So the Baldwins went broke and finally left Los Angeles. They had invested all of their money in this rancho, and they went belly up. Yet another man who had had bad luck. Every time somebody new comes in and they buy the rancho, it's like, here we go again. So yet another man who would have bad luck with the curse was Thomas Bell. Now, Thomas Bell purchased the land in 1881. This was, from the family of Howard, after he was dead. This was just another coincidence that I discovered during this research, because I had written about Thomas Bell in my book, and he was the partner of Mary Ellen Pleasant, and I'm sure some of you know that name. She was an amazing Black woman that owned so much property in San Francisco. She was building houses for other people. She did charitable work. She built a mansion for herself, but she had to pretend that she was the servant because, a Black woman that successful was not popular. So she was the silent partner with Thomas Bell, and she too owned part of the property. So yeah, the curse hits again because both of those people had terrible lives. Both of them ended up with tragic deaths and so forth. So didn't work for them either. So now the rancho's up. See, he buys that in 1881. 1882, it's up for sale again. Nobody could hold on to this thing. So here we have Griffith J. Griffith. And who names their child the last name for the first name? I don't know. Anyway, Griffith was born in South Wales in 1850. His uncle brought him to America when he was about 16 years old so he could get a really good education. And he was very bright, and he studied journalism. And his career, he wanted to be a writer on a newspaper, and he came to California and wrote as a mining correspondent for the Alto California newspaper. That job took him to mines throughout the Old West, to various states, and down into Mexico, where they were doing a lot of mining. And that's where he learned how to make money off investments with mining. And he did. He had a great deal of money from that. So then he comes down to Southern California in 1882, where there's this wonderful, beautiful rancho for sale that has been kind of a curse. And he decides he's going to buy it. The records showed that it was for 4,071 acres. And I tried to get that picture of the deed, but it's mounted with glass and there was too much with the reflections and so forth. So I just thought I would tell you about it instead. It was not workable. So here he comes. He is known in Los Angeles as the Prince of Wales because he projected a superior air about him when he strolled the streets with his gold-topped cane and a flower in his lapel. People assumed he was royalty, and he let them believe it. Let's see, I'm going to skip that for time. Later in 1884, the curse reared its ugly head again when the rancho and much of Southern California was hit by a devastating storm. The rain was torrential, causing massive flooding. Lightning struck several of the rancho's ancient oak trees, catching them on fire, and that had been predicted by the niece. The ranch workers living on the property at the time reported seeing the ghost of Antonio Feliz on horseback, and many of the ranch hands refused to continue working on the property after that time. They truly believed they saw him. And according to Horace Bell, the people in LA believed that the rancho was truly haunted. The ghost sightings continued. And I'm told by those who lead the ghost tours at the park today that they still do too. Well, Griffith apparently believed the workers enough and he refused to leave the house at night. And perhaps that's why he soon moved into the United States Hotel in the burgeoning downtown area of Los Angeles. In 1885, a very important event occurred when Griffith sold the rancho's water rights to the city for $50,000. You'll never guess what that was in today's money. $1,650,000. Can you imagine having that kind of money off of one sale? And I guess he was getting rid of his cattle and so forth, and the sheep were gone that he brought in, and maybe he wasn't interested in growing crops anymore. So he really didn't need all of the water that he had needed before and was willing to give it to the city. And they were having problems with pollution in the water from cattle. And they blamed him because the poop and everything would wash down into the river and pollute it. And then it would go downstream into Los Angeles for people to drink the water. So now LA had it, and they were able to set up different purification systems. They have a big water wheel down below that was built and so forth and so forth. So that really made a difference to the city of Los Angeles. Now, I don't know how many of you know about the ostrich farm that was on Griffith's property, but there's an important story with it, so I included it. It began in 1885 when Dr. Charles Sketchley moved his ostrich farm from Buena Park to Rancho Los Feliz. One of the financial investors in this venture was Frank Burkett. The investors negotiated a lease with Griffith with the option to buy the property. For a while, the ostrich farm brought in hundreds of visitors. There were picnic tables, dances, a bird aviary, and a mini zoo with monkeys for the kids. A small rail line was even built to bring visitors to the farm, and Griffith, bless his heart, insisted that the fares be kept low so that families could afford to go there. Up to now, Griffith was a bachelor. He was living at the United States Hotel owned by the rich Mesmer family, where he met Mary Agnes Christina Mesmer. Besides the hotel, her father owned large properties and numerous buildings throughout Los Angeles. The Rancho Bologna also belonged to the Mesmers, which includes all of the land around Marina del Rey. You can see how vast it was. So that's what her father owned. And eventually she was going to inherit, along with her siblings, all of this other property. Meanwhile, she had inherited her own property. A large chunk of valuable property in downtown Los Angeles from an old bachelor friend of her father's, Andre Briswalter. Her brother, Joseph, didn't like Griffith because he believed Griffith was after Tina's valuable property. Okay. As the wedding approached, Griffith learned that Tina planned to give half of the money from selling her property to her sister. She didn't think it was fair that she was the one getting the bulk of this thing. Griffith demanded that she deed Briswater's property to him, because after all, he was engaged to her. She refused, so he called off the wedding 10 days before the ceremony. But her mother stepped in to prevent her daughter from being humiliated of having her fiance drop the wedding plans. So she patched things up and the wedding went on. Now, I guess you can't see it because we have our pictures blocking it, but the description of the groom was amazing. You know, how he was such a rich man and educated and everything. And then said about her that her singing and playing are exceptionally fine, and her taste for flowers is remarkable, as is well illustrated in her mother's garden. She can speak 4 languages, while the happy bridegroom can converse in 3. So, I mean, that's so typical for women, but at least she was allowed to own her own property. All right, until now, until what happens. And the property, by the way, was estimated at around about $15 million today in today's worth. So it was a pretty big price. So what Griffith did then at the wedding, that was actually at the wedding breakfast after they were married, he went to the county recorder's office where he had a deed drawn up about his wife's property, changed into his name. Of course, neither Tina nor her family knew anything about his land grab until it was too late. In today's dollars, like I said, it was worth about $15 million. So can you imagine your new husband sneaks out of your wedding breakfast and goes over and has your property switched over into his name? A lovely guy, huh? Love it. So now the land is his, and the newspapers in October of 1887 posted an article about Griffith selling. I mean, he didn't waste any time here, selling 277 acres of the Briswater property to a New York syndicate for $969,500, which would be about $25 million today. That's Tina's brother. He stuck up for her, but he and Griffith were at odds all the time. So you can imagine how rich Griffith was by now, right? He didn't spend much time anymore at the rancho, and he and Tina moved into a large suite at the United States Hotel, and she had a child named Vandell. And then he just worked from his office. So I think that the property he left in the hands of the men out there that were living on it, but he wasn't really living in the adobe any longer. So I think I even read that some of the managers or the men that worked on the property lived in it for a while. In the 1880s are known for being a boom period in California history, as many of you know. And then things started to change about 1889. Property values dropped and people didn't have as much money to spend on things like visiting the ostrich farm. So Frank Purnett lost thousands of dollars and fell behind in his lease payments to Griffith. And Griffith decided to close the ostrich farm and sue Burkett for the money he owed. Dr. Sketchley packed his bags and his ostriches and moved away, and I believe he went to Santa Barbara at that point. But Burkett stayed, stating that he had made monthly payments towards purchasing the land. Plus, he'd made numerous improvements to the property, including building a large house. He already had a buyer, and he'd paid Griffith the money he owed after he sold his piece of land. So they kept going into court and so forth. But on June 14th, he lost. That was the final blow. And he told everyone that the judge had been paid off by Griffith. And I think a lot of people must have believed that because Griffith was that rich that he could buy people. Anyway, now broke, Burkett burned down his own house. Then he followed Griffith, his wife and sister, to Calvary Catholic Cemetery. Griffith waited in his carriage while his wife and her sister visited their mother's grave. Burkett shot Griffith from his carriage, but he had mistakenly loaded his shotgun with bird shot instead of the heavier duty stuff that he accidentally misloaded. So he shot Griffith twice. Griffith was wounded, having about 200 small pellets in his skin and some in his face. But believing that Griffith was dead, Burkett shot himself in the head with his pistol. Griffith was wounded, yes, but he recovered. So that was the end of that. December 1876, Griffith was already disliked by so many people in town because of, you know, the things with the deeds and the this and the that. And then now with this ostrich farm thing, he had a bad reputation. So he decided he wanted to be gaining favor with the people of Los Angeles again. So he decided he was going to donate 3,015 acres of the rancho to the city of Los Angeles for a park. That had kind of been his dream for a long time. The big stipulation was that it had to be named Griffith Park. He called it his Christmas gift to the people of Los Angeles, and the city accepted. Now that green line there on the map that Rick made, it is outlining this particular donation, and he's on the left here. There are so many contradictions and pieces of the land that were sold here and then bought back by this person and combined again, and then somebody else buys this person's plot that they had bought, and so forth and so forth. So Rick thought that maybe this would help. Oh, and that the blue is the river, and that's one of the reasons I was saying that I thought this was one of the best pieces of land that the Spanish granted, because it was surrounded by the river, so in so many areas. Okay, so Griffith said that he wanted his park to be inclusive, and this is a good thing about him. I've been giving you some not so nice stuff about him, but he wanted his park to be exclusive, and that's why he donated the property. He said that people from all walks of life would be welcomed, regardless of color, creed, or religion. That was very unusual for that time. And one of the things I read about that Charles Howard was that he was speaking at an anti-Jew and anti-different races kind of a big giant meeting in Los Angeles on the streets at one point. So for someone to come along and say color, creed, or religion didn't matter, they were all welcome, was indeed a very good gesture. Okay, but then it kind of backfired on him, because a lot of people said he was just trying to clear his name and this was kind of a bribe and so forth. But at least, you know, he tried, I guess. Oh gosh, and this is where another ghostly tale was told by Horace Bell in the same book. Feeling redeemed, Griffith wanted to celebrate with his city's dignitaries, the ones that accepted the money. So he invited them to the old adobe on the rancho for an evening of partying. The eating and drinking went on well into the night. Bell wrote that Griffith and his secretary left before midnight, but the rest of the men continued well into the, and this is in quotes, hour of the night when ghosts walk abroad. Bell continues with, according to reliable reports, at midnight there appeared among the celebrants a giant spectral figure with a fleshless face. Yeah, we thought you'd get a kick out of this. We couldn't find a fleshless face, but you know. The eye sockets emitted sulfurous flashes. Over the left arm trailed a portion of the rotting funeral vestment. The right hand was raised as if to command silence. Thus the skeleton figure shuffled with bony sound over the concrete floor. Then the ghost seated himself in the very chair where Griffith had occupied at the inception of the festivities. In the voice of the tomb, he announced, "Signors, I am Antonio Feliz, come to invite you to dine with me in hell. In your great honor, I have brought an escort of sub-demons," and we couldn't find any sub-demon pictures to give you. "An awful din at once broke loose," said Horace. Lights went out, gongs and cymbals clashed with demonic screechings. The demons came dancing into the hall. Bell says that the city fathers left in a stampede, but when they got back home, they realized they had all turned gray because of the horrible experience. So I searched the newspapers looking for something that might have happened even remotely similar, and of course, not there. So I think Horace Bell just wanted to be a fiction writer. He should have stuck to fiction. In any case. So, but I guess in that same time period, Griffith had actually become much worse in his personality. He could become paranoid and abusive, and he was drinking too much, and he was even more conceited and full of himself. So 1903 rolls around. It was a hot August. Oh, there he is in his pride with his cane, standing a pose. It was a hot August, and Griffith and his wife and his teenage son Vendel enjoyed spending time at the beautiful Arcadia Hotel on the beach in Santa Monica. They always stayed in the presidential suite with an ocean view. They had stayed there for a month. A month. Mr. Griffith had been very nervous and seemed stressed, and Tina had hoped that rest in the sea breezes would help him relax, but it didn't work. His behavior had still been strange, and he was really paranoid. After they had taken their last walk on the beach, Tina returned to the suite to start packing to check out the hotel the next morning. When Griffith came back from the downstairs bar, she looked up and realized he was pointing a gun at her. He held her prayer book in his other hand, yelling that he knew she was conspiring with the Pope to poison him. She was Catholic, and he resented her going to church and giving his money to support that religion. Handing her the prayer book, he ordered her to get down on her knees. As she did so, he said, "Remember, I'm a dead shot." She started to pray when he took out a menu card from the downstairs dining room on which he had written 3 questions. He read, "Question 1, did you poison Andre Briswalter so he would leave you his land?" And it was ridiculous because Griffith was the person who benefited from selling the Briswalter's land. So this question, she knew, was very strange. Question 2, are you slowly poisoning me? Tina would later testify that he had been acting really strange. He kept switching out their glasses and their plates of food. So he really believed that she was trying to poison him. Question 3, have you ever been unfaithful to me? Before she could even answer, he fired. She turned her head to the side, and the bullet hit her in the right eye. She screamed, blood streaming from her wound. She scrambled toward the open window. He took aim again, but she thrust herself out of the window, landing on the roof porch 1 story below. And you might notice those little lines. That is, she fell out of that window and down onto that roof below. She was brought into the room adjacent to the awning, and coincidentally, it was by the hotel's the hotel's owners. The bullet had done terrible damage to the poor woman's face. It had torn out her eye and shattered bone. She was bleeding heavily, and she had injuries from the fall as well. Tina was rushed to the hospital, and at that point, they really didn't know if she was going to survive because she was bleeding so much. The most amazing part of this story to me is that Griffiths was not arrested right there on the spot. He lied and lied and lied. He kept saying, well, she's the one that had the gun, and I was trying to wrestle it out of her hand, and it accidentally went off. Things like that. And just he kept making up stories, trying to protect himself. But there were too many witnesses, and when Tina woke up, finally, a few days later, they came and arrested Griffin when he was home with his son, because she had told the truth. And there were these other people that had overheard him yelling at her and had heard the gunshots and so forth and so forth. So, and also they didn't arrest, I started to say they didn't arrest Griffith that night. They let him stay in the suite with his son, with the blood and everything. He sleeps there with his poor son. And that really must have traumatized that poor kid because he was still pretty young. So when they came to arrest him, he was actually shocked that he was being arrested. He didn't think he was guilty of anything. He said he was drinking too much and that he should be allowed to go to somewhere for rehabilitation. He admitted he was drinking too much, but you know, it was what did he call it? Alcoholic insanity, and he was fine now, so he shouldn't have to serve any time. He hired a very expensive attorney, and he was trying to get the sympathy with his money, and everybody knew who he was. He was trying to get the sympathy of the jurors and so forth and win the case that way. And it didn't work because they got Christina into court one day and she'd worn this veil, and then they had her lift the veil and her face was such a mess. They immediately said he's guilty, and that was that. But no, he wasn't finished. His lawyer got him a light sentence, and it was, what did he get? A maximum of 2 years and $5,000 fine. And for him, that was pocket change. Now, this is his mugshot, I guess. And he was taken right into the Los Angeles jail, as it was that time. He didn't want to go to San Quentin where they were going to send him. So he figured out a way, very clever, figured out a way to postpone that. He only had this 2-year sentence. So the first 13 months of that sentence, he spends in that jail where he can conduct his business affairs, and probably had people bringing in food and all kinds of things. So then after 13 months and that was turned down, the sources say that he went to San Francisco with a guard. And he found 4 doctors. He was trying to get someone to say that he was too ill to serve any time at all in prison. And all 4 of the doctors refused to do that. And I imagine he offered big amounts of money and everything, but thank goodness they did not kowtow to him. So he ends up spending some time in San Quentin, poor baby. So a short time later, while he's serving some time in 1905, the city's board of park commissioners approved renaming the highest peak in Mr. Griffith's Park from Griffith Peak to Mount Hollywood, which it is still to this day. They wanted to change the name of the park itself because of the shame about Griffith's crime, but they couldn't legally do it. Remember that he had made using his name a big part of that contract, so they had to keep it, and that's why it is still to this day Griffith. After his release in 1906, Griffith said his imprisonment made him a changed man. He wrote a couple of books, and one of them was really nice. It was about cleaning up the prisons and prison reform, and that they shouldn't torture prisoners, and I guess some of that went on there. But he even talked the city fathers into letting him fund a prison farm on his property at Griffith Park, one of the canyon areas, where the nonviolent men could rehabilitate. But it only lasted about 5 years, and I don't know, he wasn't going to fund it any longer, even though he still had a lot of money. And then Tina divorced him in 1905 and changed her name back to Mesmer. And she and her son moved into the lovely Alvarado Hotel in downtown. It was right on the lake in, what was the name of the lake?
It's Wesley.
I think it's Westlake is what Rick is saying. And the son was so traumatized still by everything that had happened. He actually ran away from home and just disappeared. And of course, poor Tina thought he had been kidnapped. And, you know, there was a lot of hatred toward Griffith for what he had done, all the different things he had done. And they finally found, they had inspectors out and so on, and they finally found the kid up in San Francisco working as a waiter. But that boy, when he grew up, turned out to be a fine man and did a lot of good for the city, and also kept his father's park moving forward and doing good deeds for that. Okay. So Griffith, still wealthy, moves into the best hotel in Los Angeles than they do. Then it had the first elevator in the city. And he wanted to get back into the good graces of the Angelinos, so he donated more money, another $25,000, worth $841,576 today. So that's a lot of money. But to get even, the city fathers spent it on improving Pershing Square instead of Mr. Griffith's Park. So throughout the final years of his life, Griffith J. Griffith offered to donate the money to build an observatory on Mount Hollywood. He also wanted the city to construct a beautiful outdoor theater in the Greek style, he said. But most people believe that he was just trying to buy his forgiveness, that you know, they still didn't like him and they felt it was an attempted bribe. So the city fathers kept turning it down. So he was about to give up, and he left in his will the amount of money that was estimated that was needed to do those 2 buildings and also to upgrade his park to make it even more beautiful. He died in 1919, and that's when they accepted the money. Like, what the heck, why not? And they went ahead and built the observatory and the Greek theater, but it took, of course, a long time. And this is his monument. Of course, he wouldn't have just an ordinary headstone, but this is his monument to himself. And it's at Forever, what is it, Forever Hollywood Park, Cemetery. And then ironically, years later, I guess people didn't know all of this stuff. Well, there's the observatory and the Greek theater, of course. And we need the picture of the bronze statue there. So he stands at the entrance of the park as if to welcome what he called the everyday man. And I'm sure he's from looking down from heaven, feeling quite pleased that it was erected. Today, the park encompasses over 4,200 acres. The old adobe still stands where it's now, that's the park now, because they kept adding more property back in. The old adobe still stands where it's now used as the park headquarters. And Antonio Feliz and his niece still haunt the park, and the cries of the 29 men who were burned alive in one of the canyons in 1933 wildfire are sometimes heard by hikers, they say. The ghost of Walt Disney has even been seen near the merry-go-round. You're welcome to take one of the ghost walks to see if it's real for yourself. Whether or not you like Mr. Griffith after hearing all of this, whatever his motive was for leaving the grand park to the people of Southern California and indeed the world, Griffith Park is a wonderful place to visit, and Griffith's hope of being remembered for his generosity rather than his failings has worked. He's commemorated for the good he did rather than his life's failings. The end.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Colleen. That was great. Virtual applause. Excellent.
Oh, is that what that is? Oh, that's great.
I wanted to, just going to add the link into the chat there so people can get your book. 1 second. Put that in the chat while I'm doing that. And some lovely comments coming in there. Excellent talk. Brilliant storytelling. I agree. Someone was asking about the ghost tours. Do you recall the name of the company that?
I think if you just Google it, there's more than one.
There might be a few, yeah. Oh, and if you want, you can stop your share there. There we go. Excellent. So yeah, I'll leave the chat is open there. If anyone has specific questions, you can either use the Q&A section there or the chat, and I'll relay those to Colleen. Charlie noting that the city council resisted taking the land for Griffith Park because it was outside the boundaries of the city at the time. Someone noted, Rena, that recently ran across stories of Horace Bell's sons who were in and out of jail for various petty and not so petty crimes. For the Horace Bell legacy there.
Yeah. He's an amazing man. I mean, you could do a whole book just about him.
Yeah.
He was in wars. He had a womanizer. He was really incredible guy.
Great. I mean, not great. Yeah. Fascinating. Yeah, what would you say maybe it was one of the biggest surprises for you as you were, say, working on this particular one? And you mentioned that it brought about, a few of the other connections to other stories in your book, but were there ones that really stood out for you?
Well, I mean, there's so many of them that everybody, what has come to my mind is because it was such a small amount of people, a smaller population, a lot of people knew a lot of people. So, you go in and you're working in something on the workmen's or the temples or Abel Stern, and you find out, oh, like when I did the story about Ina Coolbrith, who lived in Los Angeles. She was the first poet laureate of California and had an amazing life. And she lived in Los Angeles for a while. And Pico thought she was the prettiest girl in town. And where do they go? They go to the ball at Abel Stern's house. And I did a piece on him. And, it's also, everybody knew everybody, I swear. Especially, I think if you ran on those wealthier, with the wealthier people.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, someone's asking, Candace asking the name of the girl who put the curse on the land again.
Petronella? It's ILLA, but I think Petronilla is how you say it. Petranilla.
I think I saw someone earlier asking that they wanted to see the full curse so they could possibly put it to use.
It's a long one. 3 pages. Oh gosh.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting too, you and I talked about before, and you mentioned too, just as far as the conflicting reports. I think that's really sort of an interesting component. I think often there's that sort of tendency to kind of, want to decide, oh, there's just this one way that the story went. And obviously, as you go through history, there's many different perspectives and things that are left out or things are embellished or.
Yeah. I.e. or Bell.
Right, yeah,
Bell.
depending on who's telling the story. Someone mentioned Alfred remembering that Griffith Park is fairly rugged, not perhaps best for farming, perhaps factoring in for Griffith's donation.
I saw that one about forgetting the second book. I didn't have time. There's a lot of things I had to cut, and he did write that second book, but
Oh yeah,
I can only do so much in this time.
yeah. Well, again, folks will have to pick up a copy of the book too. They can learn more from yours. Oh, Charlie's mentioned, yeah, the area north of the hills of Griffith Park, around the river, very productive. So yeah, probably some areas that were more are better for that. We have a question here. Does your research on LA history ever change your experiences or perspective on classic places in the city? So, Griffith Park or other areas, what that you've kind of maybe reevaluated?
Oh, no, not really. I mean, it's a shame that because I had belonged to the LA Conservancy for many years, and they kept ripping down these historic buildings, and that really kills me. And you go to other cities and their old buildings are still there with the beautiful architecture. And I was looking at some of these hotels that we talked about tonight and how amazing they were, and yet they're long gone. I mean, they just ripped them down.
Yeah.
It's so
I remember you had mentioned the Nadio Hotel that
yes.
Griffith doing, that was demolished in 32 for the LA Times building number 4.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And some of the mansions these people built in town too. A lot of the people, and they're gone too.
Carol Heights.
Oh, Carroll Avenue, but that's much later. Yeah, that's much later.
Right. Van Nuys Hotel is still standing. Oh, sorry, there's another in the Q&A. Is there speculation on what happened to Griffith to become violent enough to shoot his wife?
No, I was trying to analyze his character. I read everything I could on him, and that was, I write fiction as well, and fiction writers have books about characteristics of different characters, and there's usually like a bundle that if they do this, then they probably do that. This guy, like I said, he wanted every man. He was trying not to be prejudiced, even though, he could have been, because so many of the others were at that time period. And he was more open to that. And yet he turned around and was as greedy as a Dickens. And what came out in the trial was that he had been abusing his wife as well. So he had, maybe he was bipolar or something. He had this personality that just, it was like it flipped, and he got depressed a lot. And then he would go do something and buy something maybe to feel better about himself. But boy, he's a hard one to analyze, I'm telling you.
Yeah. Yeah. I may have been self-medicating with the alcohol.
Yeah. Oh, Charles Lewis.
Oh yeah, Charles Loomis, found in the Southwest Museum. Come up with the research. Come up in your research as a competitor or friend. Was that one that you came across as far as any Loomis?
Well, not with Griffith, no, with Ina Coolbrith, yeah. She was friends with Loomis, and in fact, he escorted her to the San Diego World's Fair down there in 1915 when she received her award, for poet laureate. Yeah, she knew everybody. She's a fascinating read. She really is.
So Catherine's mentioned the second book there, the Parks, Boulevards, and Playgrounds that Griffith wrote.
He's a hard one. Like I said, he's writing these books, and yet, I mean, maybe he was a changed man. Maybe he was. But I mean, the way he tried to worm his way out of that whole thing, I don't know. What do you think?
Complex for sure.
I found it interesting that his son forgave him, and the son inherited quite a bit of money. I mean, most of it, a lot of the big chunks of it went for the city, but that Van actually, like I said, turned out to be a really fine man. Was involved with the transportation of Los Angeles. He sat on committee after committee. He was responsible for bringing the Griffith Park up to par, made donations all over the place. And it seemed like he was a really good man. And he has, his mansion is right up at the edge of the Rancho property, right by the golf course. And it was up for sale recently for $8 million. It's gorgeous Spanish style house, this mansion that he had. So anyway, just an aside.
Interesting. Yeah. Someone's asking when Tina died.
Oh, not until the 1940s. And she, I guess when her son grew up and left, she moved into a house, and she did okay financially because I was looking at the city directories, kind of trying to follow her. And she lived on Spring Street, I think, in a lovely home, and she had servants. So she did okay. But I don't think she remarried.
I don't know how much you got into it too. I feel like I've also read of the and maybe the tours touch on this, but that the area of the old zoo is particularly seems to have claims of apparitions and
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
They use that for filming a lot of movies too. No, she did not recover her eyesight. Just the one eye was okay, but the other eye, she actually was shot out. So she was maimed. And she was a pretty girl. It's so sad. He shot her in the face.
Yeah, quite the daring escape. I mean, it sounds like she didn't have much of a choice but to jump out the window and
We would have killed her.
survive.
Yeah. So that was the violent side. And had he been down in the bar drinking, I couldn't help but wonder if he had. But then what prompted that? They had this lovely walk on the beach. The sun's there. They'd spent a month, relaxing, and then boom.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah. Let's see if any other questions here. Oh, there was one here in the. Is there speculation on what happened to him? That's the one we opened. Sorry. Fascinating topic and lecture. Is Adair your middle name or your maiden name?
My maiden name.
I'm gonna I'll drop the link in here one more time for your book, just so everyone has a chance to grab a copy. as I say, it's a really great read, and
Thank you.
covers all of California, but also a lot of Los Angeles as well. A lot of characters that, not say characters, but people that that you touched upon, and
Well, like I say, they all intermingle. You have Downey, and he's responsible for bringing the railroad down, and his wife's killed on when the railroad crashes in the Tehachapi Mountains, and that. I mean, there's just so much interconnection between the whole state. So yeah,
yeah.
I really had fun. I wrote it during COVID.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Tons of stuff. What else are you gonna do? So.
Right. Yeah, you have Biddy Mason in there, and other notable Angelinos. Excellent. Well, I want to thank you again so much for sharing with us, and it's a really great exploration of the history there. And thank you so much to everybody who joined us. And as I say, we will have the recording. We'll post on the. You'll receive a email of it next week, and it'll be posted on the website early next week as well. So I encourage you all to share that, and lots of thanks coming in there in the comment section. And thank you all for joining, and hope to see you at the next one.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.